Hello dear students! Today I'm going to give information about the topic of other countries where English is the official language, Australia. So today we will discuss geographical position of Australia, climate, weather, famous cities, economy of the Australia, state structure, sports, holidays and education system of Australia. So let's begin. Australia, officially, the Commonwealth of Australia, is a sovereign country comprising the mainland of the Australian continent, the island of Tasmania, and numerous smaller islands. Australia is the largest country by area in Oceania and the world's sixth largest country. Australia is a federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy comprising 6 states and 10 territories. Australia's population of nearly 27 million is highly urbanized and heavily concentrated on the eastern seaboard. Canberra is the nation's capital, while its most populous cities are Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. It is ethnically diverse and multicultural, the product of large-scale immigration, with almost half of the population having at least one parent born overseas. Australia, the smallest continent and one of the largest countries on Earth, lying between the Pacific and Indian Oceans in the southern hemisphere. Australia's capital is Canberra, located in the southeast between the larger and more important economic and cultural centers of Sydney and Melbourne. The Australian mainland extends from west to east for nearly 2,500 miles, 400 kilometers, and from Cape York Peninsula in the northeast to Wilson's Promontory in the southeast for nearly 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers. To the south, Australian jurisdiction extends a further 310 miles, 500 kilometers to the southern extremity of the island of Tasmania, and in the north it extends to the southern shores of Papua New Guinea. Australia is separated from Indonesia to the northwest by the Timor and Arafura Seas, from Papua New Guinea to the northeast by the Coral Sea and the Torres Strait from the Coral Sea Islands, territory by the Great Barrier Reef from the New Zealand to the southeast by the Tasman Sea, and from Antarctica in the far south by the Indian Ocean. Australia is both the flattest continent and, except for Antarctica, the driest. Seen from the air, its vast plains, sometimes the color of dried blood, more often tawny like a lion's skin, may seem to be one huge desert. One can fly roughly 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers to Sydney from Darwin in the north to Sydney from Perth in the west without seeing the town or anything but the most scattered and minute signs of human habitation for vast stretches. A good deal of a central depression and western plateau is indeed desert, yet appearances can be deceptive. The red and black soil plains of Queensland and New South Wales have long supported the world's greatest wool industry, and some of the most arid and forbidding areas of Australia conceal great mineral wealth. Moreover, the coastal rim is almost everywhere exempted from the prevailing flatness and aridity. In particular, the east coast, where European settlement began and where the majority of Australians now live, is topographically quite diverse and is comparatively well watered and fertile. Let's move the another topic of climate of Australia. The Australian continent covers a large range of climate zones from the tropics in the north to the arid interior and temperate regions. In the south, Australia is the driest of all inhabited continents, with considerable rainfall and temperature variability both across the countries from year to year. Australia has a wide range of daily temperatures, with summer temperatures ranging from 5.7 degrees in New South Wales to 30.8 degrees in Queensland, and to 8 degrees in Tasmania. Australia's climate varies greatly throughout the 8 states and territories. There are 4 seasons across most of the country and a wet and dry season in the tropical north. The most interesting fact is that Australia's seasons are at opposite times in the northern hemisphere. December to February, it is summer. March to May, it's autumn, and June to August, it is winter, and September to November is spring. So, let's move another topic, the economy of Australia. Australia's abundant natural resources and well-developed international trade relations are crucial to the country's economy, which generates its income from various sources including services, mining, exports, banking, manufacturing and agriculture, and international education. Australia ranks highly for quality of life, health, education, economic freedom, civil liberties and political rights. Australia has a highly developed market economy and one of the highest per capita incomes globally. Australia is a regional power and has the world's 13th highest military expenditure. It is a member of international groupings including the United Nations, the G20, the OECD, the World Trade Organization, Asia Pacific Economic Corporation, the Pacific Islands Forum, the Pacific Community, the Commonwealth of Nations, and the Defense Security Organizations, which are ANZUS, AUKUS, and the Five Eyes. It is a major non-NATO ally of the United States. Let's move another field of Australia, which we talk about the government and politics. So, the state structure. Australia is a federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy. The country has maintained a stable liberal democratic political system under its constitution, which is one of the world's oldest since federation in 1901. It's also one of the world's oldest federations, in which power is divided between the federal and state and territorial governments. The Australian system of government combines elements derived from the political systems of the United Kingdom, a fused executive constitutional monarchy and strong party discipline, and the United States federalism, a written constitution, and strong bicameralism, with an elected upper house along with distinctive indigenous features. The federal government is separated into 3 branches, which are legislature, the bicameral parliament, comprising the monarch represented by the governor-general, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, which next is executive, the Federal Executive Council, which in practice gives legal effect to the decisions of the cabinet, comprising the Prime Minister and other ministers of state appointed by the Governor-General on the advice of Parliament. Next is judiciary, the High Court of Australia and other federal courts whose judges are appointed by the Governor-General on advice of Parliament. So, the Charles III is the King of Australia. David Hurley, who is the Governor-General of Australia, and Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia. Charles III reigns as King of Australia and is represented in Australia by the Governor-General at the federal level and by the governors at the state level who by convention act on the advice of his ministers. Thus, in practice, the Governor-General acts as a legal figurehead for the actions of the Prime Minister and the Federal Executive Council. The Governor-General, however, does have reserved powers which in some situations may be exercised outside the Prime Minister's request. These powers are held by convention and their scope is unclear. The most notable exercise of these powers was the dismissal of the Whitlam government in the constitutional crisis of 1975. Let's move another field, which is the famous for sports. Sports in Australia. Sport is an important part of Australia that dates back to the early colonial period. Australian rules football, rugby league, rugby union, association football, cricket and tennis are among the earliest organized sports in Australia. Sport has shaped the Australian national identity through events such as the Melbourne Cup and the America's Cup. Australia also holds the record for the largest attendance at a rugby union match with almost 110,000 spectators watching the Wallabies play the All Blacks in 2000. The most popular sports in Australia, which are Rugby League. National Rugby League is extremely popular in Australia. Australia rules football. Australian rules football, colloquially known as footy or Aussie rules, is another incredibly popular sport in Australia. Third one is netball. Netball is well loved in Australia, especially among women. Fourth one is swimming. 3.1 million Australians regularly swim, showing just how popular this healthy sport is in Australia. Fifth one is cricket. Cricket is very popular in Australia and they are actually good at it too. Sixth one is cycling. Australians love to cycle. 2.4 million Australians regularly cycle. Seventh one is the football. Soccer. Traditional football, known as a soccer in Australia, is also popular with Australians, as you might accept from the world's popular sport. Eighth one is surfing. Some of the world's best surf is found in Australia. In fact, people from all over the world travel to Australia just to surf. Australian surfers are truly spoiled for choice when it comes to surfing spots. Ninth one is golf. Around 1.3 million Australians play golf. While it's very popular in Australia, golf isn't as renowned as some of the other sports on this list. This is generally because golf is an expensive and exclusive sport. Last one is tennis. Last but not least, tennis is super popular in Australia. Tennis heroes Rod Laver, Ken Rosewall, and Leighton Hewitt have all come out of Australia. Let's move another field, which is the Australian public holidays. Australia celebrates a number of public holidays throughout the year when banks, offices, and some shops are closed. Australian national public holidays are the King's Birthday, New Year's Day, Australian Day, Good Friday, Easter Monday, Anzac Day, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day. The Christian festivals of Easter and Christmas are public holidays in Australia. Christmas Day, 25 December, falls during the Southern Hemisphere summer summer. Many Australians annually celebrate New Year's Eve with parties, music, and other forms of entertainment on December 31st. New Year's Eve is the day before New Year's Day in the Gregorian calendar, which is used by many Australians. Fireworks over Sydney Harbour Bridge on the New Year's Eve, with community festivals, concerts, and citizenship ceremonies. The day is celebrated in large and small communities and cities around the nation. It is Australian Day has become the biggest annual civic event in Australia. Indigenous Australian events are now included. The next holiday is the King's Birthday. It is generally observed on the second Monday in June, except in Western Australia, where it usually is observed in September or October to distance it from Western Australia Day. The day most strongly associated with Australian nationhood is Anzac Day. It is specifically commemorates the landing of troops in the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. Anzac at Gallipoli on 25 April 1915. The day is named in their honor, but more generally commemorates all Australians who have fought in wars. Let's move another field of Australia. Let's talk about education system of Australia. So, education in Australia encompasses the sectors of early childhood education, preschool and primary education, which is primary school, followed by secondary education, which is called high schools, and finally tertiary education, which includes higher education. It includes universities and other higher education providers, and vocational education, registered training organizations. Regulation and funding of education is primarily the responsibility of the states and territories. However, the Australian government also plays a funding role. Education in Australia is compulsory between the ages of 4, 5, or 6. And 15, 16, or 17, depending on the state or territory and the date of birth. For primary and secondary education, government schools educate approximately 60% of Australian students, with approximately 40% in non-government schools. At the tertiary level, the majority of Australia's universities are public, and students' fees are subsidized through a student loan program, where payment becomes due when debtors reach a certain income level. Preschools are usually run by the state and territory governments, except in Victoria, South Australia, and New South Wales, where they are more often run by local councils, community groups, or private organizations. Preschool is offered to 3 to 5-year-olds. Attendance numbers vary widely between the states, but 85.7% of children attended preschool the year before the school. The year before a child is due to attend primary school is the main year for preschool education. This year is far more commonly attended and may take the form of a few hours of activity during weekdays. Most states of Australia now found government preschools to offer 15 hours per week, 600 hours over a year, for each enrolled child in the year before they commence formal schooling. Secondary schools in Australia are also called high schools and colleges, or junior, intermediate, or senior colleges. Secondary schools vary across each Australian state and territory, but they generally cover years 7 to year 10. Compulsory period of education and senior secondary schools continue to year 12. The types of schools in Australia fall broadly into two categories: government schools, being those schools operated by the state or territory departments or agencies, and non-government schools, being those schools that are not operated by government departments or agencies. Non-government schools can be further classified based on self-identification of the school's affiliation. Non-government schools are rounded for reporting as Catholic schools, including Catholic affiliated independent schools, or independent other non-government schools. Government schools receive funding from the relevant state or territory government. Non-government schools receive funding from the Australian government and relevant state or territory government, and in most cases, parents are required to make a co-payment for their child education. Today's information is over. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.